Good morning. You're watching the DMZ America podcast for Thursday, February 5th, 2026. Coming to you from the left, I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And coming to you from the collapsing, sad, pathetic, libertarian right, I'm Scott Stantis.
Good morning, Scott. Good to see you.
Ted.
Our apologies again for last week. I would take partial responsibility, but that would be a lie since it's all Scott's fault.
Yeah, it's almost always my fault. Almost always. I screwed up. So I apologize, but we're back, and we're back and better than ever with a very special guest. Yeah. What are you doing?
Yes, we are. Let me see here. I'm hearing myself back in. Oh my God, this is so annoying. I'm hearing. Okay, Scott, why don't you talk and tell us where you've been for the last week while I try to figure out my tech issues here.
It's really uninteresting. We were visiting some friends down in Florida. Florida had was part of the pole. It got caught up in the polar vortex, and so it was the coldest it had been in that part of Florida in like over 30 years. So, yeah, the trip was totally worth it. Totally worth it.
Cool. I fixed my problem. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So without further ado, let's go in and bring in our guest. We're going to be joined today by Mr. Fish, otherwise known as Dwayne Booth. He's a renowned political cartoonist and a colleague of ours. He is known for his bold, provocative illustrations that appear in Harper's, ScheerPost, and elsewhere. Known for his raw takes on politics, war, and society, Mr. Fish is sometimes criticized over his cartoons, something that Scott and I know nothing about.
Really?
Critiquing the Israel-Hamas conflict and U.S. policy in general. We'll talk all about what happened at the University of Pennsylvania, where he was a lecturer, and we are honored to be joined by the one and only Mr. Fish. Do you prefer Dwayne or do you prefer Fish?
Fish is what I prefer. Yeah.
All right, then Fish it shall be. How did you get that nomenclature?
Wow, look at you with the fancy words. I will not be able to top that.
No, hopefully not.
Right when I dropped out of college and I was trying to decide what I wanted to be, I was writing a lot of plays and I was writing a lot of essays, and I've always found the ability to encapsulate jokes and ideas easier with drawing than writing. So I would be writing, and if I thought of a joke, I would be like, oh, let me just jot that down. And the notes were always drawings. And I was living in the back of my parents' house. I didn't have a job, and I felt like I should probably start bringing in some money. So I said, maybe I'll try to sell some of these drawings. I'll put a name on them and sell them as cartoons. And my last name's Booth, as you correctly pointed out at the beginning of the show. George Booth was the biggest cartoonist at the New Yorker at the time, so I couldn't use Booth. And I wasn't going to use Dwayne, because it's Cher, Madonna, Dwayne, like using the first name was not going to work for me. And so at the time, my mother was actually, she had just gotten my stepfather a pet bird for Father's Day. And she was asking for names. And me being the genius 19-year-old insufferable know-it-all that I was, I immediately said, Mr. Fish is the best name for a pet bird. And she
kind of is.
It is. I thought it was brilliant. And she rejected it immediately. And I actually have on my wall, look at this. So I had the bird cage was in the other part of the house. So I went on a piece of paper and I wrote Mr. Fish with an arrow pointing down to the bird cage, which is this.
Aw.
And so
even then you were a good letterer.
Thank you. So my pattern for living life then was I would be up all night and then I would go to sleep when everybody else would, wake up in the morning. Again, I being a parent now, I can just imagine what that felt like, for my.
Oh, I know. That's the revenge when you have your own, and you're like, on the one hand, you're pissed. On the other hand, you're like, I was a lot worse.
So let me ask you. Yeah. So you were.
Well, let me say that she had hung this up next to my writing table with the arrow pointing down to this stack of unsigned cartoons. And I'm like, fine. the universe has just told me what I should do. So I just started like Mr. Fish on all the cartoons, sent them out, got published immediately. And the first, the editor that published me, he wrote back to me and said that he was a big fan of mine and he's been following my work for 30 years. I was 19 and he must have confused me with the famous, there's an English fashion designer who went by the name of Mr. Fish.
Oh.
Yeah, so I couldn't change it after that.
And there's of course a congressman, Hamilton Fish, and his son Hamilton Fish, very famous New York congressman.
True. Yeah.
So you didn't start cartooning until relatively late in life. I mean, a lot of cartoonists in our field wanted to be a cartoonist since I was 4, and I was like you. I wasn't that guy. What was your major in college when you started?
I was a fine art major.
Oh, okay, I was a pre-law major because.
You can tell I wasn't a fine art major.
I always went to fine art and literature, and I always loved philosophy. I love jokes too. I mean, that's also the tradition in my family is trying to figure out the most inappropriate thing to say at the most inappropriate time. And we were always trying to outdo each other, So I guess that's where my cartooning training, I guess, started. And I've always been able to draw. So the marrying of those two things, again, looking for the short form way to sort of like communicate an idea and also have the snap of the mousetrap of the punchline was early family training. And again, I only did it because, because I was reading like Mother Jones, and I was reading even the Utney Reader, if anybody remembers that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And Z Magazine and all of these magazines. And so looking at what was going on with cartoonists inside those magazines, I often thought that they weren't doing the right thing because everything felt like it was either arguing from the right or the left. And it was ignoring a sort of humanitarian center or some sort of radical, way to sort of like argue a point without relying on politicians, drawing the parameters of what that discussion should be. So I started to do cartoons that were communicating that sort of a mutual disdain for both sides and arguing in favor of allowing culture to lead the public discourse rather than politics.
Fish, you're aware of the fact that you live in the United States, right?
I was watching the documentary to Mr. Fish last night, and there's some asshole on it who wouldn't shut up. Something like Thrall, Maul. I can't remember his name. But anyway, yeah. So Ted and I kind of, you and Ted particularly, I'd say me to a lesser degree, but we've all kind of had our lefty and righty cards revoked because we had the temerity to go out and say, listen, these guys aren't liberal. These guys aren't, anything from helping the working class to running government efficiently. I mean, and oh my God, I mean, if there's a list, and we all know there is one, we're high on it. And it's, I mean, I'm trying to think. So I'm watching the film and thinking about who we are, cartoonists, editorial cartoonists, particularly. If I could dive into some personal stuff too, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You touched on it briefly in the film, and Ted and I had this conversation again once or twice on the podcast and several times in private. Why do you suppose so many cartoonists are broken in a way? We all seem to come from really fucked up families. And well, we do. And I'm just curious.
That's why I'm laughing.
Because if you don't, you start sobbing and controlling.
That's correct.
It's hard to do a podcast from the fetal position.
It might help the clicks though.
But I guess my question is, I mean, most of the good creative people I've known are broken and have used art to kind of cobble themselves back together. I'm wondering why does that seem to, and can you come from a normal family and do what we do?
I think it's harder. I think it would be harder to come from a normal family, because I think what happens if you grow up with some hardship and you grow up being victimized by certain circumstances, it actually turns you into a better listener
Mm-hmm.
and it turns you into somebody who needs to pay attention to what is going on in the world.
That's good.
Because you are a potential target. So what that does too is,
so you're saying that the hypervigilance of the kid who's watching the way that his dad's car pulls into the driveway to see if he's drunk and pissed off is going to translate to the ability to read between the lines of a New York Times op-ed.
Absolutely. I think so. And I think also connected with that too, it also allows you, with my particular circumstance, who I had an alcoholic stepfather, it also permits you to see clearly past title, past, you know, all these
those things aren't impressive.
These presuppositions of just like, oh, you should respect your father because he is your father.
Right.
You think of like, you should respect the office of the presidency because that is the president. All of that stuff was just comically ridiculous and performative to me just growing up. So as a result, again, you start to see the difference between who you are, who you should be publicly versus who you are naturally privately. Because when you're in these private spaces that we reside in, that to me has always been the truest places. And you invite friends, you invite family that you trust into those spaces. And it's sort of what this podcast is attempting to do, right? You bring people on and you want to have real conversations as if they are like your friends. How do friends talk about how fucked up the world is? And so you start to trust your company, and then you start to be able to extend empathy, curiosity, all of these things that would do us, you know, much better in the public sphere, you know, but it's the opportunity for that is becoming truncated and just disappearing.
Well, let's talk about that opportunity. I mean, you know, and it's specifically as it relates to cartooning. I mean, you're younger than Scott and I, and you're basically making your way through a profession that basically I look at it and it's just, you know, it looks like Gaza, man. I mean, there's nothing left. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, I was for real once in 140 newspapers, and these days I don't think I have 14, you know, and it's not as bad as that's not as bad as some of our peers. You know, I mean, like I'm doing this and other stuff. I mean, do you think cartooning for the time being in this country is dead, or at least the idea of the professional cartoonist who can do this for a living and live and breathe cartooning and the news and just think about cartoons and nothing else is dead? Or do you think there's going to be some, like, how are you managing this?
I do think I think it's definitely, it's been dying for a long time, you know, and you and I've had those conversations about the profession. But look at it, everything else is dying, you know, civil society is dying. You know, any opportunity to exercise free speech in a place and feel good about it, people are just pulling their punches in just normal life. And so when it comes to cartooning, you can't pull your punches in cartooning and think you're going to be an effective cartoonist, right? So I think that the society is right now needs it. And I think that there's always the opportunity to exploit the various cracks that we see now happening inside society. That is, you know, where conversation is being requested about some very serious issues. Politics are getting very, very serious. And I mentioned just a second ago about the culture. I think that one of the things that we really have to pay attention to is if you look at the history of change, positive change in any society, it never comes from politics. It always comes from the culture, and the politics respond to the culture's demands for a shift in the reality that is being occupied by everybody. Right now, the culture that we reside in is what is dying and in desperate need of some revival. How do you do that? How do you commodify giving a shit? That's one of the things that's really hard, because with the commodification of everything that's going on right now, how do you create a living wage out of criticizing the 6 corporations that control everything.
Yeah, that's a question that, I remember having with a very left-wing colleague of ours, Stephanie McMillan. And she said, I was bitching and whinging about not, winning any awards, in which Scott knows I complain about incessantly, and it's not one of my many unattractive traits. And so she was like, she goes, she laughed at me and she goes, look, Ted, what do you expect? If like you and I ran the country, like we were in charge of the country, what would we do with all the right wingers and reactionaries? And I'm like, I said, oh, I'd send them to camps or have them executed. and she goes, exactly. They're really being pretty nice. They just don't give us awards. I mean, we're literally calling to overthrow them. We're their enemies. We're not just like gently like making fun of them like Stephen Colbert. We want them to not be in power anymore. So they're not going to give us any awards or hire us.
Right. But I think that what, both you and Scott can, talk to me about this is when you're engaging in the work that you do, right? What is your expectation? Is your expectation to just engender a laugh? Or is it just to piss off the people that need to be pissed off?
Yes.
Or what are you trying to build?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, for me, it's definitely, I want to get people who may not be thinking about some aspect of an issue and get them to start thinking about that aspect of the issue. To just, for me, it's about getting people to think. I feel like people don't, and they're busy and they have stuff going on in their families and their personal lives at work. And sometimes it's like, I can't even. And it's like, well, our job is to, like, I think, light a fire under their ass so that they have to focus on these horrors that are being committed with their tax dollars and under their name.
But you're also, what you're doing when you do that, which is really funny just to hear you talk, because I think the same way. But what we're doing when we do that is that we're creating this real anxiety, because what we're doing is we're just saying, okay, here we're seeking a truth that should be applied to the society.
Right.
But what they're saying, they're taking this stuff, but they don't feel like that they can apply their findings. Where in the world are they going to apply their findings of what you are trying to get them to do? Right. Shit-givery is hard to plug into the economy, especially when all of your survival needs are determined by your ability to make a buck. Right. And
plus you're making people feel guilty and bad about themselves. Right. You're telling them, like, you're not doing enough. You don't feel the right way. Your emotions are not valid. So shockingly, we're not that popular.
Right. But that's the gist of the job. I think that's what Mr. Fish was getting at, is that, what do we want to accomplish? Do we want to have just a giggle at the end of the day? And a lot of our colleagues, and I could give you the list, and which shows why I've not won awards either, because there are so many who are rewarded in this profession who suck, who don't have anything to say other than let's have a joke. I'm going to do it. Let's say Walt Handelsman. I've known Walt for 30 plus years. I've seen his work for 30 plus years. To this day, he just announced his retirement recently. I cannot tell you what he fucking stands for. I cannot tell you what he is. I think, telling truth to power, and I know that's a cliche, but it's salient and applicable.
It's also the logo of the LA Times.
I know. Well, there's that. Well, and democracy dies in darkness, and apparently it's out over there.
It's like lights out, right?
But for me, if I could answer the question too, it's like I don't mind pissing people off. I don't mind challenging the dominant paradigm. I was hired as I worked on the Reagan campaigns. I came up in Republican politics working in them. And so obviously that informed my earlier work. But then all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, the emperor has no clothes. And Ted can attest that, especially the work I did. I liked George W. Bush initially, and then he got us into a stupid fucking war and lied to us about
stupid fucking wars.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was a twofer. And my cartoons about George W. Bush, especially the second term, were brutal. And I was constantly getting letters from editors, and, subscribers to my work saying, what, you're supposed to be a conservative. I go, I am. And what he's doing isn't conservative.
Right.
And that's why when, I've been a never Trumper from the beginning, and this is not conservatism at all. It's fascism, it's authoritarianism, but it's not conservatism.
Well,
and so
while we're on the topic, because there's no way we were going to avoid this topic. Scott, you and I talked here and offline a lot about the current situation. And for example, Don Lemon and Jimmy Fallon inexplicably becoming First Amendment heroes. But basically the crackdowns on the risk to people like us and other people, commentators in the press, and under rising fascism. And I think it's fair to call it rising fascism. Or I should say it's a fascism that is becoming more evident. Traditionally, conservatives have always been, traditional conservatives, like mainstream, respectable conservatives, have always been handmaidens of the rise of fascism. Mussolini relied on them to come to power. Hitler relied on them to come to power. They never would have, if not for the traditional, nice, respectable, well-dressed, not scuzzy conservatives. Is that something that, you think conservatives should be sort of thinking about, like, you guys need a better class of friend? Or
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. How many arguments, and let me walk that half a step back. Ted and I have never had an argument, which is in 30 years of friendship.
We've never had a fight. We have many arguments.
We disagree, but we don't fight. We've never raised our voices at each other. And I can't say that about some of my other traditionally liberal friends. I think there's something to be said that the conservatism can lead to that. Many conservatives, myself included, kind of went in that direction, and libertarian went in that direction because we really did feel it was the best way to raise all boats, that we saw the war on poverty was a miserable failure. We saw social democracy does not work in multicultural environment. What does work? Well, let's give opportunity. That's what brought us to it. It was a level of empathy and compassion and an ideal that how do we better society?
No compassion, but okay.
No, I would say there is, to say that let's let people have the opportunity and level truly. This is where the distinction comes in. Truly level the playing field. Playing field ain't level. We all know that. And that's what we fight against constantly. The government continually sets up measures and to block people from success. We're seeing that more and more, obviously.
Government, it can cut both ways, right? Government can also, tear down, can open opportunities, reduce discrimination. It can do all sorts of things that makes life fairer.
It can, and that's anyone who says otherwise is either stupid or naive.
It works both ways.
Happy combination of both.
It's a tool that works both ways,
right? But that was my gist, and that was my progression, and why I thought and think the way I do.
But now, Scott, we're in the pinch, right? We're in the clutch, right? Like what the class called the clampdown, and so here it is. It's it's 1933. I think maybe it's actually 1934.
Yeah.
Now. And, because with the brown shirts and everything, ICE, they are the SA. They're personally loyal to the president. They're paramilitaries. They're killing people. Literally, that is when you have lawlessness within the state and there's no pretense of, it's not of even pretending to investigate, it's 1934 or 35. So what about the role that people like George W. Bush, who you voted for, they created ICE. Homeland Security was created by them. They passed the USA Patriot Act. All of this was this is the KY jelly before the big fascist cock of inserts America's tight anus. I don't know, whatever.
I was wondering how far we're going to take this.
I would also add, though, that you could also say that Jimmy Carter is responsible for creating Al Qaeda. It's not always.
I would argue that 100%.
Yeah. So, but one of the things too, I just want to make this tiny point, is that a lot of how we're talking is, and this to me is one of the big problems when it comes to allowing government officials to draw the parameters of all of these discussions that we're having. There's certain assumptions when it comes to debates like this. And one of the assumptions that is sort of underlying what we've just been talking about is this idea that the government gives certain rights and privileges to people, right? That's the wrong way to look at it. The right way to look at it is that it recognizes rights and privileges that are intrinsic to a human being without government. Right. And I think that more and more, and particularly now where we are right now, people have gotten so used to recognize the power dynamic of government controlling the narrative to that extent that it can actually give human rights to people, that without the government handing these things over by merely just saying that you have them, that they don't exist. Then you have hundreds of thousands of people wanting to join ICE because all of a sudden, people have been othered and now we can beat the shit out of them and it feels really good. Right. So again, this just always goes back to me. And this is the frustration that I sometimes get into when talking to people, is that, yes, we have to pay attention to a lot of the details on how the government functions and dysfunctions. But always, I think that the solution always moving forward is the people will always outnumber what is clustered at the top of a hierarchy. So how do you empower the people that they actually have the ability, they have the power? What they don't have is recognizing the fact that they are not alone, that so many people are being victimized in the same way that they are. And that's when
exactly right.
Yeah. So the frustration is, and this is where it gets problematic with how we live and breathe now in the 21st century, is this reinforcement of impatience and the immediacy of how things are supposed to be moving. When it comes to a movement like this, it's going to take some time, and it's going to take humiliation, failure, fear. But once you amass enough people to sort of like move the ball forward in this way, that wave, you can't stop it. And you will win in the end. So trying to
think so?
I think so. I think you'll win for a little while. I think that there are victories. I mean, yes, there's racism still in the country, but it's not legislated. And there's certain things that have been broken. The feminization of society had a great deal of success. There's lots of barriers have been broken down. Right. And now, of course, they're being, removed by Trumpism. But there's that frustration that people have. They think it's enough to point to the insanity and just say, isn't that insane? Because they don't have the stamina to know how to organize and then involve themselves with what needs to be done moving forward, which is just saying fuck you to mom and dad and do what we did in the 1960s. Not that I was part of this thing. But say, it's not really up to you. It's up to the majority human component that wants to have a life worth living and a more equitable future, that you're standing.
Well, I agree with you. And I think that the lack of patience, as you said, and I think that's exacerbated by cultural and technological pressures on the culture today. I mean, I hope you're right. I mean, I really do, because where we are today, I mean, there's so much to unpack there, but it sounds weird coming from somebody like me, but I couldn't agree more. I'm just wondering have we as a country, let's start with America. I think we're done. We're not going to disappear. It's not going to be balkanization. You're not going to have the United Midwest of the world. You're not going to have, California Republic, although they do have a cool flag. They do. But I think America is done. Is there any going back? Let me ask. I mean, I'm looking forward, clinging to your optimism, which, believe me when I tell you, it's refreshing. Is there hope going forward? You seem to think that there is. Now, you have 2 kids, so I think being a parent has something to do with being optimistic and hoping for the best.
Yeah,
I'm not convinced.
Well, it's not even just hoping. I mean, it's what choice do we have? Because when I think that when you say, I think that we're done, I can also say I agree with you 100%. But that what all that is since we can only live circumstantially in the moment that we're in, I don't need to tell my physiology that it's over. I don't need to sort of have any reflex built into me that I should give up on any level, because I actually like giving a shit. I like the joy of disagreeing with people, fighting with people, having allies with me that can figure out new and interesting ways to sort of say fuck you to the powers that be, right? All that. I mean, I like being alive, and I like being surprised by the jazz and improvisational quality of all of that. So that's why I tend to, while it might sound like optimism, I think that if what we're talking about is just like, what attitude do you want to take? Right. You could also just say, from a theological point of view, you can just minimize the existence of the planet. We're an insignificant, rock on the far corners of an insignificant galaxy, blah, 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 blah. People have said that, right? That's an attitude idea. Or you could just be wowed by the luminosity of the grandeur of confusion of elation of moving through a day. As shitty as things get, I'll still walk outside and all of a sudden I will have a moment of transcendental being overcome by the fact that the sky is blue, that the sound, the rain, which needs no translation, is moving me in a way. That's the kind of life I want to live. And if it's going to be taken from me from a bureaucracy, what am I supposed to do with that? I mean, I'm going to try to prevent it by celebrating life and giving people some reason to believe that life is worth protecting, right? Acknowledging that we're all vulnerable and that we need each other's support and protection. Then all of a sudden you're politicized in a way where it's just like, whoa, wait a minute. What? You're going to take away my children's right to like healthcare, control over their own bodies and all of those things? Yes.
They never had that here to begin with.
It's just, again, I think that it's really important to have an attitude, like conceptually 100%. I can agree with you. Yes. I mean, I could map it out on paper to demonstrate that we are completely fucked, because it could be a problem of human consciousness. There's no indication that something that can abstract like we can to ignore. I think that things got fucked up in 13,000 years ago when we figured out farming. Yeah. Because once you control the environment, then you can sort of like abstract the significance of the health and well-being of the environment and the ecosystem that supports you. No, I live above it. Let me look at the Bible. All of those things are supposed to be serving me. Yes, that's a fucked up perspective. And if you follow that, with a chart that we can put together, yes, we're fucked.
I mean, but here's the thing. Who's this we you're talking about, right? I mean, like one of the sources of sorrow, I think, for Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, I know you will, if the, is that, like, for example, you have sorrow in the fact that, like, our cartooning and our journalism professions and your Republican Party and your America are all like basically going down the shitter. Yeah. Those things are all true. Now, but the question is, why do you, it's like when people say, like, I don't follow sports, but when people will say like, oh, my Packers did well this week. I'm like, they're not your Packers. Like, you don't own any shares in the stock of that corporation. They're not yours, and they're only you. But if you decide to attach yourself to them, I mean, you can psychologically, but the truth is, like, you choose, like, people choose to be upset at the result of a football game or not, because it's just a choice they decide to affiliate themselves. If you consider yourself, like, I don't consider the United States to be my country. I don't consider the Democratic Party, which I no longer am part of and haven't been for many years, to be my party. I'm not a part of many things. I don't have a lot in common with most cartoonists. It's like, I don't, because I'm not trying to achieve the same things that they are. I'm not. So, I mean, is an answer to sort of, I don't mean withdraw, but sort of just maybe like view yourself as like floating like you mentioned 13,000 years ago when hunter-gatherers settled down right in the Fertile Crescent, and I agree 100%. That's when things got fucked up. But the thing is, at that point, like, you can decide to just be like in your mind like a nomad and just wander, and you're just trying to like,
you're
get
just
surfing through life, and you're just trying to like enjoy the ride and make the most of it, and avoid trouble as much as possible, and avoid ice goons, and try to be like when I think about like moving to France, which you and I've talked about. Yes. I don't think about it because I'm going to show them. I'll vote with my feet, then they'll see. They don't care.
No, they won't care.
About I just think the wine is better in France, and
the fromage is,
and I'd be away from ice goons.
Well, that dovetails into a question I had for Mr. Fish here, is that we've got 700 ICE agents now just cut loose in Minnesota. I mean, so they're going somewhere. And,
they sure are.
So Ted and I both expect someday to hear, and then we'll be in a prison in Uganda. It'll be awesome. But Ted touched on, we're thinking of, I'm just leaving, just saying, fuck this, it's dead. We're going to go someplace at least where it's nice.
As human beings have done for thousands and thousands of years when things got fucked up. I want to see if Mr.
Fish is, you seem to be of the mind that you're going to stay, you're going to fight this, you're going to stand up, or have you ever given any thought to leaving the country?
Oh, 100%. Okay. Yeah. I mean, my wife and I were actually in Europe this summer. I was looking for job sort of opportunities. Because there's two ways. And again, this does have to do with shifts in mood as you move through the day and through your weeks and so forth. When I was attacked and driven out of the University of Pennsylvania, it was just this, and I've gotten death threats before, but this was really organized. And they were threatening the lives of my students. They were threatening my children. Jesus. So, and what was in the air was that all of a sudden, it wasn't just me anymore. I've got a family, and then I had, by extension, this community at Penn that I really cared about. And all of a sudden I felt somewhat responsible for potential violence turned on them. Mm-hmm. So that's when it was just like, all right, maybe I should actually just, in a way, surrender and move on for my own peace of mind. And also because, the three of us just sitting here, it's very hard to be a cartoonist inside of the United States right now. It's not a livelihood anymore.
No.
So that was going on. But then at the same time, I also had that feeling of when I started to see other colleagues, other professors actually, who were moving to Canada and who were just moving away. I started to get that feeling of just like, wait, somebody's got to stay, because not everybody can move. What about the vulnerable population that will need voices and megaphones and all sorts of things to engage in the fight from inside the disease? Because you do get to have, I think, just a little bit more credibility if you are in the United States and you remain complaining about the United States.
Sure.
Baldwin wrote beautifully, about what was wrong with the United States when he wasn't here. That's totally fine. But he also had
Gore Vidal.
Gore Vidal is another one. So there is a way to do it, but I think right now the more people who are interested in staving off the shift into hardcore fascism need to populate the space, so that's sort of where
until the right.
I know, but again, like this is in a way, and I'm not minimizing that. I feel the very same way you do, Ted, about that, and Scott equally. But in a way, it is almost it's almost a privileged perspective, in the sense that there are other artists, intellectuals, writers who have been jailed and suffered much more than we have, and they continue with the fight, right? And yes, that knock on the door, that is always seems like, Philadelphia is one of the targeted places. ICE is starting to show up in Philadelphia, which is where I am. That's not my fear of that, because that's what they're trying to stoke. They're trying to stoke
Yeah.
justification for self-censorship.
Mm-hmm.
I can't allow that to happen.
Yeah, that's not my bag. That's not my bag. If I was going to self-censor, I would have self-censored for profit, and maybe had a better shot at getting a job at a paper when I was younger.
Let me jump in real quick, Mr. Fish. What happened to you at University of Pennsylvania?
Yeah,
many
please.
of our viewers and listeners may not know. What?
Please explain.
Give us what happened.
Okay, well, this happened after October 7th, when all of a sudden there was that call for trying to ferret out anti-Semitism on campuses. And they had the congressional hearings. They had Stefanik, drilling the president of Penn and MIT and Columbia. And if you remember,
a proud moment for my alma mater, Columbia, which really acquitted itself as a proud stalwart of free speech and free
absolutely. Yeah. And I taught it at Barnard for a semester. I had a bunch of Columbia students and everything, and it really
wow.
And and again, all of this, I really, well, I'll table this, but I mean, I really was going to go off on this tangent about how important it is for these college students to get access to critical thinking, which is less and less available to them because colleges and universities are, job prep institutions for sort of elite society now, which is sort of repulsive. But anyway, so when all of that was going on, and the president of Penn attempted to have a substantive sort of response and conversation, context, and all of that stuff, which you can't have on the Hill. So all of a sudden, she looked like an idiot. She looked like she was equivocating and doing all this sort of like stuff. So she quit. And while all that was happening, there was also corresponding with that, there was a festival, a literary festival that was going on at Penn that was called Palestinian Rights, WRITES, that had been scheduled, before October 7th. So October 7th happened, and all of a sudden, they were going after Liz McGill, the president of Penn. How can you allow this anti-Semitic festival to go on? And Roger Waters was one of the invited speakers because he's been an advocate for this, for Palestinians for a very long time. And so there was these doxing trucks that were going around campus that had him dressed in his, from the wall in his, leather jacket with the two hammers, red armband with the sunglasses on with the machine gun. And it was just like, how can you let this Nazi sympathizer, onto campus, blah, 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 even though the Nazis actually killed his dad, something he's been grappling with all of the work he's been doing ever since he was a child. But anyway, so there was blood in the water at all the Ivy Leagues. So in January, this newspaper called the Washington Free Beacon decided to target me, saw some of the cartooning that I was doing outside of the classroom. This is not even stuff I do inside the classroom. Many of the cartoons that they called cartoons weren't cartoons. They were illustrations that I had done for Chris Hedges, who I've partnered with for a very long time. His journalism on what's going on in the Middle East, so forth. But anyway, the newspaper grabbed all of that stuff, presented many of them out of context, but also some of the just things that are against the state of Israel, they were calling, anti-Jewish. And then they wrote this article on me. I published this article on January 31st, and all of a sudden the shit hit the fan. And what happened was that the president of the university, who had replaced Liz McGill, who has no academic experience at all, he comes from like Penn Medicine. He's just he's a repulsive human being. His response to the firestorm was that, yes, he agreed that my stuff was reprehensible and that I contributed to hate on campus, and that what's going on in Palestine, this is no time for satire, he said.
Jesus Christ.
And so I was just like, the dean of Annenberg, who was supporting me at that time, because she was a new dean and we knew similar people at USC. So I think when push comes to shove, she just didn't want to, because the president was demanding that she fire me. And I've been there for 11 years and I've had the most popular classes in Annenberg. I can document that. He wanted her to fire me and she said no. And so there was this compromise where he said the right to free speech, but this anti-Semite is a scumbag. So then for the next many months, I needed security on my classroom. There were death threats again, like all of this stuff. All of the conversation at Penn moved off of school emails, and it became worse than McCarthyism in the sense that we were told the faculty would not communicate using any school emails. Best to do it off campus, face to face. If you have to use anything else, use WhatsApp or something like that. So all of a sudden it became this place of terror. And I, from the beginning, kept, and this ties into exactly what we've been talking about, is when it happened, I said, this is Annenberg School for Communication, right? I said, we should have a public forum where we get to drill down into this issue, where just having an opinion that runs contrary to the state of Israel, that is not commentary on Judaism. So I had Cornell West was going to be part of it, Chris Hedges, some other, do it for free, because they're supporters of my work. So Annenberg would not host it. And I kept for the next months, I am just like, please, let's have a public statement, because the only one out there right now is coming from the president, who is calling me and by proxy you scumbags for having an anti-Semite teach in their school, and they wouldn't do it. So what ended up happening, to shorten this very long story, is that they drove me out. The dean, true colors slowly sort of came to fore. She would stop answering my emails. She said she would not give me a recommendation or anything for, leaving Annenberg. And it's been absolute radio silence. It's like I never existed.
So were you, I just want to be clear here. So did they ask you to resign? Did they fire you?
They fired, they said it was budgetary reasons, which is, so that's
they
funny.
Just didn't renew your contract or what?
What's that?
Did they just not renew your contract or?
Yeah, they weren't going to renew. They said, okay, for budgetary reasons, we have to let you go. And so we will let you know when the budget gets better for, maybe
you should
next
sue.
year. I know I've talked to people, but I've talked to lawyers, and it seems that what lawyers want is they want something that they want, like a class action suit. I'm not, it's not a big enough issue for them to go against somebody like Penn,
Well, there might be a class action suit here, right? There's a lot of defendants, and there's a lot of plaintiffs. Scores of academics lost and students.
Well, a lot of it.
Their diplomas removed from them.
Exactly.
Columbia banned students' organizations. My favorite is that they banned Jewish Voice for Peace. You know what the first word is in that organization?
Right. But one of the things, a lot of the faculty that was disappeared from Penn, they were given an offer they couldn't refuse, and part of that is a non-disclosure agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those people that I would otherwise be like, yeah, let's fight this, they were bought out, and so they can't. And they won't. And so there's just all of this fear, and of course they crushed all the encampments, which full well. It's brutal. And some of the faculty that remains, and I still meet with students. There's still students.
And this was under the Biden administration, just to be
under
clear.
The Biden administration, 100%. Yeah, so it got really, really nasty. But as a result, my numbers of supporters have grown huge, because there are people that they're reading the writing on the wall, and they know that this is a time to, if you're not willing to speak up yourself, give support to people who are speaking up, and hopefully demonstrating a relentless desire to keep speaking up is going to get more people involved.
Have you been able to parlay this into, and as crude a question as this is, into some financial support, like a Substack? There have been a couple of our members of our fraternity who have turned, who have done this. It seems to me this is an opportunity for you. Has that happened?
It is. I get some money through Patreon, which is where I put the artwork stuff. And then I recently, just a few months back, I started a Substack, and my Substack is called The Independent Ink. And that's where I have a bunch of essays. I do interviews and attempt to provide a space for the necessary conversation about what we're talking about. Like I said, trying to get that with Penn, where it's just like, okay, people are pissed off. Let's have a forum where we can then do the deeper dive to lessen actually the emotional heat, so that you can have sort of a face-to-face with somebody. Because one of the things that I did when I was getting all of the death threats is I answered them. And I have a folder of, and this was true for also what was happening with the war in Iraq. I would get death threats and I would always engage. And the trick with that is, I do have some sympathy for people who are just like, all of a sudden, obviously, if they're being told that I am a raging anti-Semite who's poisoning the mind of children, okay, that would piss me off. All right. So I would want to know, I would probably approach the person being accused a little differently than some of the people who approach me. But I wanted to give these people an opportunity to have a correspondence with me, end up into a place where we recognize that the fight should not be so abstracted that we can vilify each other with so much venom. And so this folder I have of correspondence, they all end with an apology from the person who attacked me.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. And that's all you really need to do. Again, this goes back to the culture aspect of what I'm talking about. Because at one time, the arts community was involved with this kind of debate and conversation. It allowed for intent and context to be part of the conversation, which is the most important thing. The most important thing.
Well, people who lash out, 99.9% of them they feel powerless. They feel like it might feel absurd to the three of us, but they feel like we have giant megaphones, right, and they don't, and they're unheard, and so the only way they can get our attention is by yelling at us, calling us names, threatening us, and that'll wake us up. And basically, it's like they've had a fight with themselves before they ever sat down at the computer to send us something, and then when you actually do engage or they're confronted with what they did, it dawns on them like, oh, there's an actual vulnerable flesh and bone human being on the other end of this thing, and like, holy shit, what did I do?
Yeah, and it also allows this thing that I always found very curious when it comes to so many people have their most ingrained and most passionate beliefs are usually the ones that are sort of reflexive, that they've never thought about really. So getting the opportunity to just be some version of, why do you think like that? And I've been disarmed in similar ways, where I'm just like, well, they say that who are they? Well, it's the drill down to the Socratic method, drill down into anything, and all of a sudden it's just like all we have are largely our assumptions built on hearsay that we've gotten from people that we thought had some authority. Right. So getting into the sort of the muckety muck of just this place where we're all equally foolish in many ways is a lovely place to get, where somebody wanted to actually put a bullet through my head. Now they're sending me pictures of themselves with their dog on the beach. That's a way to better society.
Agreed.
Well, I agree. And I think Ted and I have both reached out to people who have, had over the top comments about our work or whatever. And inevitably, it's always, I don't know, I cannot honestly say that there's ever been a response other than what you're describing. The person was kind of aghast that they said that, but, and then to Ted's point, they probably did feel powerless. And the only way to get the attention is to, scream and yell and, pee on the carpet.
And also feel like you're on the side of the angels. Everything has been so oversimplified that there is good and evil, and that anything that runs contrary to your team is evil.
Yeah.
Again, if you could just soften the rigidity of that kind of thinking, It's cute. It's important. And jokes can do that. I mean, that's really the part of too. Yes, a lot of the stuff that I do has commentary and stuff in it, but sometimes using flat out humor to sort of like mock somebody in a way that is like really clever and not mean, I think can alleviate,
No, that's a huge, always been a struggle for me. I look back at I'm probably best known for my George W. Bush era cartooning. And like, I look back and I hate most of the work I did then because I was seething with rage. And, and when you're seething with rage, you don't have that. I mean, that would work in France, but here in the United States, the national temperament is like, it's more effective to make fun of things that are ridiculous than it is to scream about how they're evil. So for example, if you're making fun of ICE, or, if you can get to the point where you make fun of the fact that like, these are funny looking dudes wearing weird gear and way too many pockets. And what's in all those pockets? And also why are they wearing their little, like sort of, man thong on their chest that sort of covers 1/3 of their flabby bellies? If you can, the ridiculing them is much more powerful. And I would say Scott Adams was good at that, like lately, the late departed, at making fun of bosses and stuff. But if you can that's better than just being like, these are Nazis, even though they are Nazis,
right? I think there's a way to also consider that and the way that I consider the work that I do. And you've seen there's a lot of my stuff that is balls to the wall, inappropriate and furious. But it's inside the aggregate of all that I do in the same way that, like, if you look at somebody like Bob Dylan, right? Masters of War, right? There's a way to look at that song and just say, well, that's an oversimplification of the problem, maybe, right? Then you look at It's All Right, Mom, Only Bleeding song, which is, 7 minutes of him creating like this this view of society that makes it sort of comical, dark, interesting, blah, blah, blah. Then you move to the next track and, you're listening to Ramona, come closer, shut softly your, watery eyes. And all of a sudden you're in this other place that is just another way to experience what life feels like.
So let me ask you, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Track, and then that's what I always say to people, like, you're looking at one thing that I do. I'll have the conversation with you if you look at all the stuff that I do, which does involve writing. It involves all of this sort of stuff. I have many facets. Sometimes I'm really, really, really angry. Sometimes I'm disturbed by the absurdity. Sometimes I'm elated by the absurdity.
Well, you must get that, like, sort of like people see one, especially nowadays. And this is the worst part about not being on staff at a paper, as Scott always has been, is that, Scott, you're in a paper and you take for granted the fact that most of your readers can contextualize your work in the fact because they've seen it historically for years,
day after day.
And they're like, okay, so if Scott suddenly says something that criticizes the Republican Party, that's more notable than if, say, Nick Anderson does it because he's a conservative, right? And they know that. But these days, most cartoons appear solo, by themselves, on a phone or whatever, on a social media feed. And so you must get this where you look at, people, well, when did you ever criticize Biden?
Right. Always.
Like zillions of times.
Always. Yeah. I've been, it's funny because when Obama became president, I was all of a sudden invited to speak at these conservative gatherings.
Yeah.
Because I was criticizing Obama.
When I was doing stuff about Bill Clinton, the John Mellon Scaife paper, very far right, outside of Pittsburgh, the Greensburg Tribune Review, I believe it was called.
Yes, very good.
The editor used to call me and be like, he bought my cartoons and he'd be like, "You really nailed it to the Clintons," and I'm just like, thanks.
Yeah, well, you guys, I'm touched on my own going against type, but you guys, Fish, your work on Obama, which I thought was phenomenal. Ted, your work was again phenomenal. But Mr. Fisher, I apologize, I don't know the reaction, but the reaction to Ted's work was over the fucking top. It was bananas, how virulent, how vile, how angry. You would hope that they get that angry, and act in the current situation. Now it's like, well, let's think about this, and maybe they. But the reaction to Ted's work, especially during the Obama administration, was over just. And you had to have the same thing, I presume.
Yeah, and there was a couple of that's what was funny. I mean, I even did get early on. I got a couple death threats from people who were Obama supporters. I'm like, that's impressive to me. That I
yeah.
Somewhere I felt safer, from getting the death threats from the Obama people.
Oh man! Well, we've kind of reached the hour mark here.
Yep, we have.
This went by way too fast. Thank you.
No, we had to do it again if you're willing.
Oh, always. No, this is like-minded. Cool. Not even like feeling riffraff. People with hearts and brains. I always.
Yeah. No. Totally. I mean, that's the part I think that's in a weird way, even as much as the art, the culture of cartooning, of cartoonists. Being people who, Scott, you've talked about this a lot, who used to be regularly invited onto national televised news forums regularly, be on the NewsHour on PBS or, on the Sunday morning talk shows like This Week or Meet the Press.
Presidents used to meet with us.
All those things are, I mean, it's a very, very interesting, diverse, maybe not diverse. It's a very interesting group of people.
Yeah, not diverse.
Not diverse. Not at all diverse. The opposite of diverse.
Before you let you go, like I said, I watched the documentary last night again. And can I ask on a personal level, Daryl Cagle is in there and he's effectively saying that he's not. How did you not punch him right in his fat little face? Because he is personally responsible in large part for the erosion and diminishment of this profession, frankly, because he wouldn't carry cartoons that had any weight or any substance. In addition, he would go, and I worked at newspapers where he tried to do this. Yeah. I don't know if you guys know this. He would write letters to my editor and say, I can save you a buttload of money if you dump your cartoonist and use my $5 a week syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a lot of editors, to their discredit, said, yeah, I mean,
that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%.
So I respect your restraint. I truly do, just because I think that's the attitude that's killed editorial. It's supported. Editors hate us, right? They always have, because they can't do what we do. I mean, I think it's really come.
And we're hard to edit
because they can't do what we do. I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I had an editor who of another section who was an asshole, and so and kind of would always say like really dismissive, nasty things about my work in meetings. And I finally turned around and said, you know what? Fuck you. A, B, do what I do. Come up with an idea. And say, well, I can't draw. I go, stick figures.
Thus endeth the theological discussion for today. Yes.
Yeah. And I said, and the day two, he came to me and said, yeah, this is a lot harder than it looks. I go, yeah, go edit Marmaduke and shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Well, just to address that part of the film, Daryl and I have known each other for a long time. And the conversation that we had was much longer than what ended up in the movie. So there was some pushback. There was some different back and forth. So, that's the decision of the director to create those moments where there is frustration. He wanted to have some of that frustration, of somebody saying that they couldn't sell my work because it was just too edgy and they just want nice things. That said,
that's also not true. I mean, let me just say, like, I started, in national syndication in 1991. And, the thing that really pushed a lot, I mean, granted, the situation wasn't as bad then as it is now by a long shot, but still, it was, most reactions to editors was not about the politics. It was about the what this stuff looks so fucking weird. It doesn't look like normal political cartooning with cross-hatching and donkeys and elephants. But once they got past that, a lot of editors really liked the fact that it was representing a point of view that they weren't normally getting. So I don't think it's true. I think most editors who have half a brain, which is most editors, they know that there's a market for far left, agitprop cartooning. The 20% or 15% of their readers really, really want it.
I agree, but still, when it comes to like a business model, he
could have sold you.
What's that?
He could have sold you. He just didn't want to.
I think everything that I had sent to him had a penis somewhere in it, but still. But the point is that once you look at the job from the Kegel perspective, which is, how do we strategize the marketing of this sort of stuff?
Right.
Yeah. So that's going to always tend towards the more conservative point of view. I'm not degrading you, Scott.
Small C conservative.
No, I got it.
Understanding of what that is. But that said, I do remember this was a pretty interesting thing when Trump was elected. Kegel actually wrote me an email a few months in, and it basically said, listen, I feel bad about saying that your stuff was too strong. He says, not only was it, strong enough, I'm starting to think it's should be stronger, that you've actually been communicating the outrage in a way that I was wrong to say should have been tamped down a little bit.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw it, but last week, the guy who does the daily cartoonist, cartoonist of the day roundup thing, he always hates my work. He's always like crazy Ted Rall, so far left. Anyway, he posted a thing basically with one of my cartoons. Again, same sort of thing, like, well, now far left cartoonists aren't looking so crazy. I'm like, you guys were always wrong. Okay,
exactly.
That's how this is.
Yeah.
But whatever.
So that said, me tackling Kegel maybe would have been a better scene.
By the way, in fairness, Daryl did offer to syndicate me. He just didn't want to pay me a real salary.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Oh, the world we live in.
Others can argue about who's more radical. We can have a radical off. Anyway, we'll be fighting. The winner gets the top bunk in the cell at like Guantanamo.
Right.
Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. This was so much fun. Thanks everyone for liking, following, and sharing the show and supporting the show as best you can. Please tune in next week. We're here every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern time, unless Scott ditches. And
I will not. I promise. I swear.
Do not ditch. Okay. Anyway, and we'll make sure you follow Mr. Fish's work. Just Google him. You'll find him everywhere where cartoons are sold, which is unfortunately not that many places anymore. Now, Fish, you probably don't know this. Are you going to do the singing part of the show?
Is there a Fish song? I'm trying to think if there's
any song, because during the outro, which is 18 seconds long, Scott sings. That's the tradition.
We just started this. Yeah, you really trust me. Dude, you don't want okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any Fish.
I'm trying to think of a Fish song.
Well, Robin Hitchcock has quite a few Fish references in his. You're probably not familiar with his.
I am not. I'm trying to think. I can just do I'll do like a Fish jam. I can do that. How's that?
Okay. All right. That works.
Yeah.
All right. Off we go.
Oh yeah.
It's not bad. That was not bad.